Few of you asked me what my opinion of the new update was, and so these are some initial thoughts, at least some basic things that I have observed from the patch. Obviously, this is a decent patch overall. Keep in mind that this is my opinion and yours may be different to mine. Top tier jets, utterly fantastic. I've had fun playing them, and the new stuff is all okay, except for, well, with regards to the amount of premium aircraft that there are at top tier currently. Seems like on a poorer note that, well, the whole entire team matchmaker is basically filled with these things, and if you want to play in a particular style in realistic battles, and air realistic that is, you can't necessarily achieve that, and well, the MiG-23, let's not get started on that piece of junk. Good looking piece of junk, might I add, and if anyone has a spare one laying around, I'd very much like to have one. Moving on. Decompression is probably one of the things that was most championed about, at least, you know, last year and so on and so forth. And thus far we have seen them make steps towards decompression, and it has generally had an interesting effect on the game. Be interesting to see how long that long-term looks like, but essentially you have a bunch of aircraft going up in battle rating and thus increasing the BR limit, and obviously decompressing a bunch of jets. Now, is it really that effective? Time will tell, but for now, the changes are immensely positive. Probably the best thing of this patch comes out of the Italian Sakataro, which is certainly, you know, an aircraft which I highly recommend you go have a look at. It's just, you know, immensely powerful, enjoyable, and is, I would say, almost borderline overpowered. However, they'll probably increase the repair cost on that one at some point in the near future. It's good to see that, you know, aircraft like the F3H got their Sparrows, and the MiG-21 MF finally got a radar warning system. You know, that is fantastic to see. I remember that in the patch notes. And the F5E is certainly a top-tier worthy jet with double the thrust of the A model. Certainly, definitely feels like it, and is certainly a lot more fun than playing a MiG-23. There's new camouflages on the form of the marketplace, and that is always a good thing to see every update and an ingest of new content. Finally, I have a Royal Australian Air Force camouflage for my Canberra. It's about, 3 to 5 years late, but it's nice nevertheless. Nitpicking now, I suppose. Where is Gaussian's roadmap? Well, at least there initially was for aviation, but I'd like to see at least a roadmap for each of the game modes. That'd be fantastic, so that way at least we have an idea of what is to come this year. Obviously with beyond visual range missiles and so on and so forth, a little bit concerning, especially when some of the comments in the local community stem like this, complaining about how modern planes and their weapons seem to play the game for you. But that's the point. We invented self-guiding missiles so that we didn't have to guide them manually. We have created radar at IRST so the pilot didn't have to scan the skies constantly. The trend in aerial combat advancement for the past 75 years has been reducing the pilot workload, so go figure. In a game where most of the work is already done for you, workload reducing technology makes the game seem pointless and hollow. Let's go on to some negatives, however, that we've run out of positives, at least for aircraft. The Yak-28B is possibly one of the worst offenders of air RB tactics that I've seen in a very long time. This is basically the embodiment of all things that players hate about bomber aircraft. This is probably why Gaussian have been not necessarily quick to add stuff like the Vulcan B-52, the Tu-95, because Cold War bombers and interceptors and attackers, while being the forefront of any Cold War system, a lot of them really got pushed out the wayside by the time the 1970s hit. So the Yak-28B is a very invulnerable space climbing bomber that relies heavily on the AI ticket bleed. And honestly, even if this does get an attacker version with interceptor or missiles like there was another version of, this thing is completely and utterly useless to a team, and just encourages bad team play and camping over airfields. Speaking of camping over airfields, airfield AA being switched out for SAMs is not necessarily a positive change. It in itself has derived quite a bit of controversy, as I covered earlier last week. In certain cases, they are completely dominant of the skies within a 7 to 8 kilometre radius of an airfield, and in other cases, they are just unreliable for defence, and now they just further encourage, douchebaggery and tactics which are not necessarily viable to team play. After all, the game for the last few years has been team deathmatch. I don't see a necessary change into that unless you want to move it into enduring confrontation or something like that. That discussion could be saved for another time. And unfortunately, the server performance isn't any better than it was. They said they had fixed it, and ghost shells are now a thing again. Obviously, that is a cause for quite concern. There is also ghost missiles, and there is some issues with lock-on and radar, but, you know, those bugs are being ironed out as we speak. And don't get me started on the nerfing of rewards and reduction of rewards to game modes, for example, like simulator battles. So overall, the patch is mostly positive, however, it does have its fairly strong drawbacks. I hope these will be fixed soon. Anyway, that is my thoughts on the patch currently.